Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. This is Sheng Peng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now, also with NBC Sharks. You can find my work at San Jose Hockey Now and also at Twitter, Sheng_Peng.
Hi, I'm Keegan McNally. I'm a writer for San Jose Hockey Now. You can find me on Twitter at halfwall_hockey and at my website, half-wallhockey.com. We're excited to bring to you tonight a couple of interesting Sharks topics. First of all, we have a Anthony Duclair interview at the end of the show where we talk about his upcoming Black Ice documentary that he was a part of, some of his time playing with Joe Thornton in Florida, and we ask him about the Hockey Diversity Alliance drama regarding Evander Kane.
Is he going to try to get Jumbo to center him this year with the Sharks?
Yeah, that's the big news. This year, or we also have some updates on the Erik Karlsson trade situation because we cannot avoid Erik Karlsson trade situation drama. And the big news of the week regarding the San Jose Barracuda, which you might have heard through a recent Martin Kaut interview. So welcome, everybody. We're very excited to get started today. Sheng, how are you?
Oh, pretty good. I'm about to drive down to LA. So let's talk, and then I'm going to start driving, and it's a good 6 hours. A very grave mistake on my part to drive from here to LA because it's going to be 100 degrees where my family lives at in LA. But it's about 60 or 70 in San Francisco right now. But it's my mom's birthday this Sunday, so...
Yeah, so you're being a good son, and you're going to be driving 6 hours to see your mom. Make sure you remind her repeatedly that you're driving 6 hours to come see her,
and gaining 40 degrees. So.
Yeah, and you're going away from beautiful weather into 100-degree weather. No, that's awesome. It's where I'm at. It's about 75, 80, so it's a good temperature here too. But it has still been hot this entire month. Now that we have our weather report out of the way, why don't we start just so we can get it out of the way? Because last week we spent probably an hour talking about the Erik Karlsson trade.
Erik.
Yeah, we basically were stuck on Erik Karlsson. So let's get it out of the way. Let's ask one question. Is there any update that you know of regarding the Erik Karlsson trade situation?
Yeah, I've been posting what I've been reading, and I think in general the consensus is that it is between the Penguins and the Hurricanes. Still, there are no other teams. Elliot Friedman said that he hadn't heard of any other teams, which we have talked extensively about. That matters for what the Sharks are getting back. The more teams in it, the better return the Sharks get. But that right now that they're we're at kind of a standstill, a game of chicken. It sounds like the Sharks don't want to retain a lot. And so at that rate that the Sharks supposedly want to retain, we don't know exactly how much, but it's not what teams want. Teams aren't willing to give a lot. And so unless we have some move in either of those areas, the Sharks retain more, or the Penguins or the Hurricanes are like, well, we really want Karlsson, so okay, we'll give you something and you don't have to retain that much. We're sort of a impasse now. I still believe that a trade will happen before training camp. That's my prediction. I could be wrong. I also think that my guess is that it will be the Penguins. And Friedman did say that it was tipping toward the Penguins. That was his word. But it's my own belief, too, just looking at the situation. And also things that I reported, I believe, last week, that my impression, my understanding, talking to sources, that the Hurricanes are just in it for the bargain. They're in it to snipe the eBay auction in the last last second because the offers or the deal is too good to pass up. So that's sort of my impression of where the Canes are at with this overall. Also, too, just looking at the rosters of both teams. The Hurricanes, as they are now, they don't need Karlsson, are still considered a clear cup contender. And they are right now, they don't need to add anything. They're a deep team top to bottom. The Penguins, on the other hand, even though they did make some, I think, strong additions in terms of depth roles this summer, they still need something, I think, to take that next level or to be considered in the upper echelon of contender. I'm not saying that Karlsson is the perfect solution for them, but there aren't a lot of game-changing players out there in general. So Karlsson is a solution or answer. And if things work out, if he can stay healthy with some of his teammates there, Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Rust, Genso, a lot of great players on that team. Maybe they can go get somewhere special. And so they need a guy like a Karlsson, I think, to change the trajectory of the team. Carolina doesn't need Karlsson.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like, one could argue that Carolina does need them more just because they haven't won a cup, whereas Pittsburgh has. But I understand what you're saying, basically, where Carolina is a deeper team. They already have the depth on defense that Pittsburgh doesn't really have. And it seems like Pittsburgh wants to get Karlsson above and beyond Carolina, but this is all kind of the speculation that we deal with on the
we know that Dubas, he said it flat out that he likes Karlsson a lot. We've heard nothing of the sort from Don Waddell. Doesn't mean that Waddell doesn't like Karlsson, but also too, just look at Carolina's defense right now. If they don't lift a finger for the rest of this postseason. And also, too, I think they're cap compliant now, too. So they really don't need to do anything with their roster. And right now, the top 5 defense is Brent Burns, Slavin, Pesci, Brady Shea, and Dmitry Orlov, who they just signed for 2 years,
$7 million,
almost 16 million. Yeah, 2 years. I think 7.75 is AAV. Wow. So this is not a team that is really lacking in any clear area in my estimation, whereas the Penguins, they are, and so they should be a little bit more motivated to add a potential game changer like Erik.
Yeah, it feels kind of like the Hurricanes are kind of there in case the Penguins deal falls through, like in case it's September 15th and they've been, arguing for 3 months about Erik Karlsson and they can't get it done.
And I think Karlsson got traded on September 13th.
Exactly.
I believe so. And that did cross in a training camp a little bit, but not too deep into it. So maybe we'll see something like that too, which will be a uncomfortable situation to start training camp. But I'm there for it. So
it's going to be, again, we're going to have updates every week when we can get updates. But I feel like the more we get into the July and early August, that it's just going to take longer and longer. Like they just kind of get entrenched into their own rosters, and it takes a lot to move people away. So, it just feels like maybe that Carolina is going to wait around to the end and see if, things fall apart and the Sharks really need to move Karlsson, kind of thing. And then they're like, we're here if you're going to send Karlsson at $5.75 million kind of thing. So,
or if we don't want to send anything back, you want a 5th round pick.
Yeah,
fine. Retain just $2 million.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see what happens with the whole situation. We don't want to talk about everything, or we don't want to talk just about Erik Karlsson today. I think we have some pretty big news regarding the Barracuda and some of the things that were said about that organization that I think a lot of Sharks fans have on their mind. So the biggest thing was...
Well, can I interrupt you first? I want to jump and make sure that we mention that Martin Kaut did an interview with Czech Press, Robert Rampa of, I believe it's IDNES. And so a really actually interesting interview, not just the Barracuda stuff. If you've seen the story on San Jose Hockey Now, I linked to the rest of the interview, and even through Google Translate, which I try not to use. I had someone actually translate the whole interview, even the stuff beyond the Barracuda stuff. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff in it about Kaut's kind of mental health and just how difficult it was for him to play in North America with not a lot of family support, that sort of thing. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that we shouted out Robert's excellent work there, and it is a really interesting interview, no matter what you think of it.
Yeah, it's honestly something that goes beyond just the San Jose Sharks and the San Jose Barracuda. It's kind of an interview that is almost like a tell-all interview that players do after they retire, kind of thing. Like something that their career is done that they mentioned happened 10, 15 years ago, but Martin Kaut is 23, 24, and he's like starting the prime of his career. And if you don't know, and if you're not familiar, Martin Kaut was offered a qualifying offer by the San Jose Sharks to continue to be in the organization, but then elected to sign a deal in Czechia, so to go home to his home country and play for, I think it's Dynamo.
HC Dynamo. I'm not
it.
sure how to pronounce the city part. Pardubice. I should have looked it up. It's spelled I've written it a lot without saying it. It's spelled Pardubice. I think that's actually where Hasek is from, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, it's a major Czech hockey power. They're one of the pretty dominant teams in the Czech league.
Yeah, so he elected to basically leave North America and go play for them. The Sharks retain his rights, basically keep him in their reserve list, but he doesn't add on to their contract list. So he's still going to have his rights retained by the Sharks, but he just won't be playing for them for next year. And when he went over there, he had a couple of things to say regarding his decision.
He released, like you said, he released his post-career memoir.
Yeah,
about 15 years early.
And it kind of, not broke, Sharks Twitter for a minute, but it kind of scared people. And the biggest thing was, and we're going to get to a bunch of the different points that he made or things that he talked about. So Martin Kaut, in his interview when he went back to Czechia with Robert Rampa, mentioned a couple of, or it's a very long interview, but he mentioned a few things that are worth noting. First of all, he mentioned that a Barracuda coach, an unnamed coach, picked out someone for him to fight every game. They said, this is the way that you're going to make the NHL, is you're going to fight this guy and you're going to compete against him. And he used the word specifically to fight. He mentioned that the guy he was told to fight was often bigger than him and more experienced in fighting. And Martin Kaut is not an experienced fighter at all.
Yeah, only has had 2 fights according to his hockey fights profile, both in, I believe, his first or second year in the AHL. Got it checked up, but early in his AHL career. And he's been in AHL for, I believe, 5 years.
Yeah. So, and when he was just trying to break in as like a 19, 20-year-old in the NHL, maybe he fought a few times to show that he has some grit, but he's not a big fighter. The other things he mentioned was that he said that each of the youngsters on the Barracuda wanted to play for themselves specifically. And he also wasn't very motivated to fight for youngsters that were playing for themselves only. He then goes on to talk about how the Sharks offered him a 2-way contract, which is pretty standard for a player of Martin Kaut's caliber in terms of his production.
And he admits it in an interview too, that he doesn't think that he deserved a 1-way contract. So that's worth noting.
But he tried to amend it, or they tried to amend it so that he could at least earn more than $100,000 in the AHL. Because in a 2-way contract, you earn a different amount in the NHL versus the AHL. And they weren't able to work that out. And they weren't able to settle on that number. So then he jumped ship to Czechia. And then finally, the Sharks, after getting wind of this interview, noted a pretty strong response to his claims. And this is a direct quote, but they said, "We've been made aware of comments attributed to Martin Kaut stating that he was pressured to deliberately instigate a physical engagement with opposing players on the ice. Let us be unequivocally clear that no such direction was ever given or insinuated by the members of the Sharks or Barracuda coaching or hockey staffs." So, Sheng, first, I guess, on the biggest question, is there something rotten, something awful going on with the Barracuda organization?
Right. And that's, I'm going to get into kind of my thoughts on all of that. But first, let's talk specifically about the fighting itself. Yep. And from what I understand, the Sharks checked with Joe Will, John McCarthy, assistant coaches Kyle Hagel and Louis Mass before they issued their statement. So there was sort of a double checking, like, hey, is this stuff true or not? Now you can believe the Sharks or not, but obviously what came back from the Barracuda side of it, the Sharks believed what they heard, and so they put out their statement. And so in my mind, then now we have one of these, he said situations. Who do you believe? Because they're saying 2 very different things here. And so I've been trying to dig at this all really since Monday, beyond the original story that was posted at San Jose Hockey Now, and try to talk more with Martin. Try to reach out to. I checked with multiple sources, AHL executives, NHL scouts, player agents, players, and so on. And not everybody got back to me, but a lot of people did. I probably texted or emailed about 20 different people. And I'll say that I got responses from, I think, more than half of them about just different questions I had about everything surrounding this. And I will say that, and these are people with a lot of experience at the AHL level, that they haven't heard of anything as specific as Kaut's claims in this day and age of hockey. This isn't Slapshot. This isn't the 70s.
Sure.
And so I will say flat out that if Kaut's claims are completely true, that coach should be fired, in my opinion, especially if you consider Martin Kaut's injury history. And he's mentioned he's had a couple of shoulder injuries and he's had a couple of concussions, 3 concussions, I believe he said. And so I think that I think that there are still cases where we're fighting. There's a place for it in hockey still. I do think that, but to pressure a player, especially, well, any player, not even a fighter or non-fighter, to fight every game is sort of beyond the pale.
Agreed.
And so,
I think there's 2 big caveats that I think we should make. One is that the Sharks, like I already said, deny basically that
completely,
allegation.
yes,
Completely deny it.
like
That
not
actually
even
happened.
once, yeah.
Yeah, they said that that's not something that they did. So we
Mhm.
want to make that clear that we're not putting words that this actually did or did not happen. We don't specifically know. We have, they're denying it, Count saying it happened. The second is that you're absolutely right. Fighting in hockey is a difficult issue right now. And it's something that a lot of people believe should be, part of the game. And it is a history of the game. Like, not just like that should be a part of the game, but it's been a part of the game. But that you also should not force people who don't fight to fight. And I think Count mentioned that in his interview, basically, where there's a bad hit, there's a reason to fight. Players want to fight. Like,
Yeah,
if
and he
something
would too.
happens, but like to these kind of staged fighting, guys that are not accustomed to it will get hurt. Not just like they don't want to do it; they can get hurt. Those dudes who fight in the AHL are seasoned fighters. So I think it would be agreed wrong in any coaching staff to ask that of somebody like Kaut, who doesn't fight. Kaut's not a small guy. He's a big guy, but he's not a fighter. And there's a
Right.
difference, Like VL is not a huge guy, but he's a fighter. Like, he can
Sure.
fight. So like if he got asked to fight, it wouldn't be beyond the pale like you're mentioning. It
Yeah.
would be something that he's, agreed upon, basically. This feels a little bit like coercion in a way that is not appropriate if it happened.
No, it's not. But so on the other hand, though, and like I was alluding to, none of my sources have heard of anything like that going on in general with the Barracuda or the Sharks.
Yep.
And from other clients, other Barracuda and Sharks players. And so I do wonder if something was lost in communication, but maybe that's too easy a crutch here, because Martin's interview was pretty crystal clear. So
Mhm.
I don't want to say that that part wasn't. It's pretty crystal clear what he was saying.
Sure.
But I do wonder if a coach might have been alluding more about Martin needing to play with more fight, not fight as an actual fighting, but more compete, more battle, which I honestly agree with. I actually think that is one of the reasons why Martin Kaut isn't in the NHL, because he's kind of a finesse player in a big man's body, but not quite enough finesse or skill to just coast or just live off of that at NHL level. And this is my opinion. Again, I'm not saying that he needs to be, punching dudes,
Yeah.
at
He's
all,
not Milan Lucic. He's not going to be like
at
that.
all. I'm not suggesting that, but
Mhm.
but I also add to that, and I've spoken with Martin on multiple occasions when he joined the Sharks and the Barracuda, and his English is very good. And so I do want to be very clear about that too. So So even though I wonder if something was lost in communication, I can't say though that tracks either necessarily, because like I said, his English is very good. But
Mhm.
I will say too though that it's also highly unusual, right, to ask a recent first round pick, 2018, who was drafted for his skill mainly, to become a fighter on a nightly basis. I mean, to turn him into, I guess, try to turn him. I don't think the Sharks told him to stop scoring, because when he was with the Sharks, he played with Hurdle. When he was with the Barracuda, he played on skill lines too, right? He wasn't a guy that they were putting out there like 7 minutes a night and,
Yeah.
just tango with the biggest guy necessarily, right? So they were still want him to score, but maybe it was like a Milan Lucic, where at least Lucic in his prime, when it's a guy that was both a scorer and a fighter. But that does seem unusual. And I think just to end the thought about whether or not the Barracuda asked Cal to fight on a nightly basis, and before we examine if there's a culture problem in general with the Barracuda, if there's something really a huge
Sure.
a rot, distinctive rot going on with the Barracuda, I think you do have to decide kind of who you tend to believe here. To be honest, if you tend to believe what Kaut said more, and if what he's saying is true in the end, then yeah, there's a big problem with the Barracuda. People should be let go for some of this stuff. Players are being taught in this scenario, and this is of course right now in a very different era of hockey, that I will say the wrong thing. Again, telling a guy that's has 3 concussions, allegedly telling a guy with 3 concussions and just 23, you got to fight every night.
Yeah.
You got to literally punch a guy every night, right? And take punches every night.
Yeah.
On the other hand, though, if you think that there's maybe some communication gap or something else going on here, then that's what we're going to continue to talk about. Just other things that Cal said about the Barracuda, and also other things that have come out after the Cal interview. And I'm trying to address everything the best I could with everyone I talked to.
Yeah, and it sounds like the fighting allegation, one way or another, is going to be difficult to corroborate, right? So, like, we may not ever know if that is 100% true or
Hmm.
not, or if there's some sort of in between. Like you're
Yeah.
saying, something like you need to fight more, as in compete more, versus actually fight. It's possible. He did mention specifically, this is the dude they told me to fight, and they mentioned, or he mentioned, a guy who was like 6'8" that they
Right.
told
And
him to
his
go fight.
countrymen too, right?
So, and his countrymen as well. I don't. Obviously, the Sharks deny it, and this is what Kaut has said, and we'll have to wait to see if there's more information regarding that, and if there is, and there's any kind of evidence, then clearly that's something that needs to be addressed. Whatever the coach was that said that, but the other things that he mentioned, I think you're right. We should also talk about, because there might be some merit. I think there might be merit with the Barracuda's youngsters playing for themselves rather than and playing as a team. This is a team that I watched multiple times throughout the year that was undisciplined, would lose big games and lose them late, would take undisciplined penalties constantly. It was a team that at certain points felt like players were playing to get into the NHL rather than playing to win games. And I just wanted to ask you if you had heard anything about that as well. Just from my own observations, I felt
Sure.
like there might be some merit.
Yeah, and I can corroborate that part of it. There is thought to be some lack of accountability among the youngsters, Barracuda youngsters from last year. But I also had to add too, though, that I don't think this is abnormal in any AHL organization. At the AHL, as we know, is kind of a weird mishmash of
Sure.
fringe NHLers, right, trying to get back to the NHL, and youngsters trying to make their mark. And just those two factors, I think it's hard to mold them into a cohesive unit. I don't think that kind of sort of a layout or whatever, right, to begin with, right, is conducive for forming a unified team. So while I do think that this is a problem and something that needs to be addressed by the Sharks and the Barracuda, so I do agree actually with Martin said to some degree. I don't know if every young player I would paint with that brush, but um, I don't think that also that it was necessarily just an isolated incident either that Martin is alluding to there. And I do think that that's something that needs to be addressed internally by Coach John McCarthy.
Yeah, and it's not like I don't have any specific names of players or anybody that I could point to and say they're playing for themselves, but maybe just an overall, a newness that this team is. We mentioned it in the beginning that this is a brand new Barracuda team. It's a brand new arena. It's a brand new head coach. It's a multitude of youngsters that have never played in the AHL or not played significant minutes,
Sure.
all joining a team at once. And I think there was some hope that the veterans that were added would kind of mold that team. But maybe it wasn't the molding that we thought was going to happen, to be honest. It was improved, though. I think the year before, the Barracuda were awful to watch.
They're even
Really,
worse. Yeah.
they
So
were
last year's
really, really
actually
bad.
was improvement.
Yeah, last year it felt like
Significant
an
improvement,
improvement,
at least on the ice.
at least on the ice. And just from, I think, integrating so many new prospects into the system, in some ways it was a success. Just whether or not it led to the ultimate goal of being a competitive team, probably not yet, at least.
Right, right. And I would add one thing too, that young players are often selfish. Like, this is not a abnormal thing also. I would
Sure.
say that most young players, are probably trended more selfish because, in part, because the teams that they played on growing up, they were the absolute rock star of the team.
Yeah.
They were among the top, 2, 3, 5 best players on the team. Once you get to the AHL and obviously the NHL, things start to change, and a lot of players adjust and are able to kind of able to grow up and mature, and some do not. But it is a very common thing too. So again, I'm not really disturbed by it. And we can see it by, like you said, how the Barracuda played and their eventual record, that it wasn't always a cohesive unit, which, again, some blame needs to be placed there, but it's not it happens in virtually every AHL organization.
Yeah. And I think, it's hard to say like who deserves any kind of blame for that kind of thing. It is still like the first year of this, quote unquote rebuild, the first year of this new organization, new staff all over the place, right? From development
Sure.
coaches to the head coach to everybody. And it's not an excuse. It's just maybe something that, in the post-year interviews that they can look at and say, all right, this is where maybe we need to improve, things that might have been overlooked or overstepped that we'll get to in just a minute, that maybe they should address for the next season, for the upcoming season. Another claim or another thing to bring up about Martin Kaut is he talked about his contract situation where it's interesting because he mentioned that he wanted to make a specific amount of money if he was playing in the NHL or AHL rather than the NHL. And he knew that he was going to get a two-way contract, a different amount per if he was playing by the Sharks or by the Barracuda. But he wanted to make more than $100,000. And, I'm not a California resident, but others are. California is expensive, even for
It's a reasonable ask on Martin's part.
Yeah, for professional hockey players. So, how you have to wonder how unpleasant of an AHL situation it would be if, a couple tens of thousands and more dollars would make it tolerable. Is another, and that's a pretty crass way to put it. But if you could tolerate it for what a AHL career person would be making, is it that intolerable kind of thing?
Yeah, and I'll say to that point that I noticed that too, but I will give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe that's how much he wants to be in the NHL. And also, too, that's maybe how much confidence he has that he would end up with the Sharks and not the Barracuda. It is worth noting that all of his comments were directed at the Barracuda. All of his negative comments were directed at the Barracuda.
Sure.
He even mentioned in that interview with Robert Rampa that I didn't put onto my website because it wasn't. I try not to take too much from a paywall article, but Martin did also mention that at the World Championships that he wanted to impress the Sharks coaches when Czechia had played the U.S. and Sharks coaches on the other side. Obviously, David Quinn was there, Scott Gordon, Ryan Warsofsky, and so on, so on. And so I want to be clear on that part of it, that he was very specific about the Barracuda sort of being the target of his ire. But in terms of the specific contract thing, though, I will say this in support of what Martin is saying in terms of contracts, and this is just my own personal observation. I've looked at some of the contracts signed, AHL contracts signed at the end of the Doug Wilson era versus the Mike Greer era, and I think there's more work for me to do here. So I don't want to say that this is conclusive, or maybe someone will give me examples after this podcast of, just where I was flat out wrong, which is fine. But I do want to give you examples, something that I saw last year and I meant to follow up on, write about, but I never did in the end because it's not relevant anymore. But well, now it is relevant. But so I saw this last year, both Jeffrey Viel and Jonah Gadjevich. For the last 2 years, they sort of occupied the same role on the Sharks. And Gadge was with the Sharks more, but both are energy guys, fighters, right?
Sure.
And just want to compare their two contracts, though. In July 2021, Doug Wilson signed Jeffrey Viel to a 2-year, two-way NHL contract. And in NHL, it was the veterans minimum, $750,000. But in the AHL, it was $225,000 in the same year and $275,000 in this past season. So I'm going to move on now to August 2022, and Doug Wilson has stepped down, and Mike Greer re-signs Jonah Gadjevich. Wilson re-signed VL2. Re-signed Jonah Gadjevich to a one-way, 2-year NHL contract, $750K in the NHL, just $120,000 in the AHL. That's a big disparity between guys that are maybe similar-ish. And so my larger point, and speaking of what Martin is talking about, and I am supporting what Martin is saying, but it's also not saying a great thing about him. Like, if the Barracuda aren't valuing you that much,
sure,
I don't think Mike is as maybe generous as Doug might have been. I think VL, if we're talking about VL and Doug, we're talking about a guy that, VL is a character guy, a guy that you can grow and see as a future leader organization. Also a guy that, that Doug picked up as a free agent, I believe. Right. And so, there's a little bit more of a reward, I guess, for a guy like that. I think before with Doug, whereas Mike is maybe not as loose with the purse strings, maybe. And it's not that some Barracuda guys are still paid quite well for the AHL level. Just for example, Ryan Carpenter and Scott Sabourin this summer. Likely AHL signings. They have veterans minimum contracts in the NHL, and they have $400,000 if they play in a Barracuda. So that's, it sounds like Martin Kaut would have come back for sure for that amount. And that is generally on the high end for an AHL salary when we talk about the two-way contracts. Just give you another example, Andrew Agozzino, who the Barracuda traded this past summer, and he asked for a trade, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Andrew Agozzino last year, veterans minimum in the NHL, and was over $300,000 in the AHL. If he got sent down. Same with the Svechnikov, too. That's another example of that. So it's not like across the board Mike Greer isn't paying for, or Joe Will. Joe Will is the actual GM of the Barracuda. Between those two, it's not like they're not willing to pay for talent. But if they don't value as highly, actually, I'm going to throw one more comp at you. Jacob Peterson came up with the Sharks didn't miss a game, didn't get sent down once, right? I think he's the same age as Kaut. He's a year older
Just
than,
about.
yeah,
Yeah.
the draft year is 1 year difference. But Jacob Peterson re-signed with the Sharks this year. 1 year, I think, is a veteran's minimum too for the NHL. But his two-way, his AHL contract is, I believe it. Don't quote me on the exact figure, but I believe it's 375,000. It's a higher one, and
Interesting.
so it's clear here that that the AHL, as far as I know, there isn't really a salary cap too, and all that kind of stuff too. So it's just a matter of the Sharks didn't quite value Kaut as much as he wanted to be valued, which is unfortunate for Martin there. But it's the kind of the reality of sort of the of the situation, kind of. And there are players that Greer, Joe Will were willing to pay more, and Martin wasn't one of them.
Yeah, and it's tough because watching Martin Kaut, there were games when I really really enjoyed him, especially when he first started with Barracuda, and then a couple of the games that he got called up in the NHL, and I felt like he was making an impact. And
Mhm.
I don't know exactly what changed or why. Maybe it is something about this, competitive skill thing that they keep mentioning, like something about the compete level rather than the actual talent, right? And that's not to say that Couch doesn't compete. He does, but he just isn't that type of player that's going to be checking everybody through the boards every night. So it could be something that they just aren't valuing in their 13th, 14th forward at this time, and they offered him what they felt like he was worth, and he felt like he was worth more.
Right, right. And I'll say that on my view of Martin in the NHL, my honest assessment, and I mentioned this actually in one of our early episodes when we found out that the Sharks had qualified Kaut, that I was a little surprised by it, even though he put up 5 points in 9 games in the
Sure.
NHL, which is not a bad total. You do the math there, 40 plus points, that's great. But I didn't think he made that many plays kind of watching him. I just, for example, to compare him to Peterson, right? And Jacob Peterson is smallish, and I wouldn't call Jacob Peterson a high compete guy either by any stretch. But I think Peterson on a consistent shift to shift basis made more plays.
Yeah.
Got the puck to the next guy, didn't lose just little things,
Yeah.
big
More of an
things.
impact, more
Yeah, it was
scoring,
more
more
overall
yeah,
impact, and
more
Jacob,
dangerous on the ice.
I think so. And Jacob deserved, another look. I don't know if Jacob is going to end up to be a regular NHLer, but he deserved more of that extra look than, in my opinion, than Kaut did.
Yeah. And again, it's kind of like there were games when I felt like Kaut did. It's just it wasn't always.
Mhm,
And the back to Kaut's, I guess, future aspirations. He also mentioned in the interview that he wants to play in the NHL.
mhm.
It's not that he's going to Czechia to only play in Czechia. He mentioned that his coach Vaclav Varada, which I
Former
apologize for,
Shark.
former Shark, apologize for the pronunciation if it's
No,
wrong.
that's right.
He said, quote, he said he'd help me get back to the NHL. So it's an interesting thing to bring up about a coach that he's going to be playing for, that he's going to be leaving said coach to
Yeah,
come to
he's
the
hoping to leave
NHL.
soon.
Yeah, hoping to leave that coach. It's kind of an interesting quote, just to me at least. I don't really know what to make of it other than he clearly saying that he's not like done with the NHL. He
Right.
wants to come back in some capacity. I highly, highly doubt it's with the Sharks. Like,
No,
but
I'm pretty sure. I would be shocked. That would be
very weird.
I'm a little red now. Just color me shocked if that
Yeah.
were to happen.
Yeah, very, very strange if it were, but he does seem to want to come back.
Yeah,
So,
I do think he does. I've heard that not just obviously Martin said in an interview, but I've heard it elsewhere too, which makes it kind of odd that he would sort of burn the bridge with the Sharks. And I don't know if the rest of the NHL is going to take kindly to looking at what he said and be like, ugh, this is a guy that we really want on our team, to be honest, unless he is, scoring at some kind of, when you score a lot, when you are a first line, second line NHL player, you're scoring a point per game, you can get away with a lot, honestly.
sure.
But if you're not one of those guys, it's not as easy to sort of toe the line there.
Yeah, absolutely. So an interesting thing you brought up earlier is that Andrew Agozzino, the captain of the
Mhm.
Barracuda, had requested a trade earlier on this offseason. I think at some point it was mentioned that he wanted to be closer to family,
Yeah, I
uh,
just said person
personal reasons.
that.
Yeah, so personal reasons, and was traded from the San Jose organization to Anaheim.
Mhm.
And then shortly after that, there was a lot of other veterans who had left. We had Jeffrey Viel had left, who had been a
Mhm.
longtime Shark since 2018, something like that, 2018, 2019. Aaron Dell, who had been in and out of the organization. He's left. He's also older. He's 34. He's probably still, maybe trying to find some different playing time, and there's only one net, et cetera, et cetera. Cal Criscola, who we had just acquired for Jasper Weatherby, Derek Pouliot, CJ Suisse, all had
Luke
left.
Johnson, I
Luke
think.
Johnson, who was
Yeah.
also acquired last training camp-ish area or somewhere around there, all had left in the offseason. And it's not uncommon, right,
Right.
for AHL veterans to kind of bounce around teams, right? They're looking for the best deal and they're looking to, their opportunity to make, NHL impact, right? But it does seem like a big exodus all at once in terms of veteran players. And you mentioned they brought back Ryan Carpenter, who's an older Shark / Barracuda member, and then Scott Sabrin,
And Nathan Todd too.
and Nathan Todd as well. But do you think there's any merit in or any kind of something to make about this kind of exodus of veteran talent from the Barracuda?
Right now, I don't think so. I'm not saying that each of these individual veterans were totally happy as a clam with the Barracuda. Like we talked about, AHL is a weird place where everybody's fighting to get an NHL. You're competing with your own teammates, right? And that's not conducive toward you can form a cohesive unit from that, but it's a lot harder to, I think, right? Because everybody has a kind of an individual agenda, I think, right?
Mhm.
And so at this point, I've tried to dig out. I have a few specific things to say about specific players, but just in general, though, the AHL, like you said, is a really high turnover rate league. And, let's look at the 2021-22 Barracuda. Look at that roster and see how many guys left from that, too, right?
Sure.
And so I wouldn't jump to conclusions just based on even everybody leaving. And I asked Patrick Williams, he covers the AHL for both the NHL and AHL.com. I would say that Patrick is the preeminent AHL reporter out there, or he's up there. And I just asked him in general. I thought so, and I also asked a couple other scouts about this, their perception of it, just to kind of make sure that I was on the right track. And Patrick said, and I quote, that the Barracuda's turnover doesn't seem particularly out of the norm compared to other organizations. Now, I want to stress that it doesn't mean that a guy did not leave unhappy, or even multiple people did not leave unhappy for this or that reason, right? But does it speak to the Barracuda are a place that no one wants to go to? That, again, there's a culture problem. There's something, huge and awful going on there. I don't know. I don't tend to think so. Let's start first. A couple of these cases really interested me just because they're the ones where maybe a guy was unhappy and that's why he left. And first, Agozzino, right? And the thing with Agozzino, though, Andrew Agozzino, is that what makes the case interesting, first of all, is that he was on a 2-year contract, and so he was slated to come back with the Sharks Barracuda organization. I thought he was the Barracuda's best player last year, and
100%.
I
Yeah.
thought I thought that he seemed like a good influence on everybody, and I think he was. I don't think anyone's taking that away from him. But I guess what I'm saying with Andrew is that we really don't know why he left. And I don't know that for certain at this point. I'm still kind of working on that. But one source told me that he thought that he had heard that Agozzino wanted to move out east to be closer to family, which, he got traded further, got traded down to Anaheim. But my source then told me that, well, that's what the trade market kind of was. And I would say, though, that with Agozzino in Anaheim, that maybe Anaheim was a little more attracted to him for reasons apart from the Barracuda or San Jose. That the Ducks just hired Greg Cronin as their head coach, a former Colorado Eagles head coach. Agazino played with under Cronin. I believe, from what I understand, that they're close, Agazino and Cronin. And so maybe this is just a maybe. I don't know this for a fact, so I don't want to say maybe Andrew Agazino did leave the Sharks Barracuda organization because he hated the Barracuda organization. They were terrible to him, etc., etc. So I'm not discounting that possibility, but it is also possible that if you go to a coach that knows you better, like Greg Cronin, that you might have a better shot at NHL. You might be, closer, a little higher up on the recall list and all that sort of stuff, right? And so that could be indeed the case. Again, don't know that for certain, but the next guy I want to talk about isn't actually one of the veterans who left, but Montana Onyebuchi. And Montana Onyebuchi was signed by the Barracuda a couple years ago, and around midseason, I was hearing one NHL scout asked me, "Hey, what's his like contract situation, and also why isn't he playing?" Because I think at the time Montana was hurt. And so I started getting an inkling then that there was interest, NHL interest in Montana, in signing him to an NHL contract. And anyway, eventually he signed with the Coyotes organization. Sure. And I checked around on that, and I'm not even sure if the Sharks offered a contract to him. They might have, because they did invest a lot into Onyebuchi's development with the Barracuda. But Onyebuchi was also from the Doug Wilson era too, and so I'm not quite sure exactly the direction of that. But what I did hear though from a source is that he didn't hear anything negative about Onyebuchi leaving the Barracuda organization for the Coyotes. And again, doesn't mean that there's not anything there, but I'm trying to let you know what I've heard from people that I trust that are, in the business. Finally, Jeffrey VL is someone that I tracked on. But if you look at VL, I mean, look at the contract he got from the Jets, right? He got a one-way contract, not a two-way contract. So for the full 775, like, the Sharks weren't going to match that. Yeah. And so maybe he wasn't happy here, but it's also clear that he got a contract that I don't think the Sharks were going to match. And I think the Sharks were moving on from the sort of the two-headed VL Gadjevich monster as we saw this off season. And so I'm going to say again that I haven't heard anything. Agazino's a maybe. And so I'm still wondering about that. But Onyebuchi, VL, from what I've heard, nothing negative. And the other guys, they weren't as sort of interesting cases to me, just because, I think Agazino and Onyebuchi are the most interesting because they had clear choices to make. Where Agazino could have clearly come back with the Sharks, and Onyebuchi, maybe, I don't know, but, maybe could have joined the Sharks organization. But the other guys, again, there's high turnover rate in the AHL. And so
and most of them were their first year on the Barracuda, right? CJ Sweet and Bouillot and everything. They were kind of like their first year. So it's not like, they're turning over, but they're not longtime Barracuda that are, the only one that I would think of would be VL and Aaron Dell. Aaron Dell is like, been in and out of the CUDA organization, but he's also older, so he probably wanted to chase another contract somewhere.
They already had 3 goalies last year with the CUDA, and so maybe the Sharks didn't want a repeat of that.
VL's contract is, it's an NHL contract. It is a one-way, like you're saying. It's gonna be his opportunity to make a full-time role in the NHL, something that the Sharks probably weren't going to give him.
I mean, even without Wi-Fi, I take that contract.
Yeah, exactly. Even with really, really poor Wi-Fi in Winnipeg. Yeah, and I've always said
I can buy plenty of extenders that full NHL contract.
I think I've always said that VL has a little bit more skill than he's been attributed to. He's not.
Oh, sure. In AHL, he is a terrific player. He's a guy. Like, I actually thought years ago, and I wrote about this when the Sharks first brought him on, that I actually saw a comp with John McCarthy, and that VL could be a kind of guy that you have in your organization for a decade or so, and leading the way.
Yep.
And so who knows? VO could still come back. Who knows? John McCarthy, actually, interesting enough, left the Sharks organization for 1 year, joined the Chicago Wolves, and he came back. And
Yeah.
so you can leave and come home again.
That's true. And the last one, I guess, is I guess, we've talked about a little bit, but Anya Bucci, kind of like a not homegrown talent, but something that the Barracuda invested a lot of time in. And
Sure.
it's just honestly a great story. Like, even if
Sure.
he wasn't signed with the Barracuda, it's awesome that he got an NHL contract.
It is.
And, you can say one way or the other.
Congratulations, Montana.
Yeah. Congrats. He's a super fun player. He's always been fun. That's like, the hallmark of his game. He's just a very, very fun player. But anyways, I want to move on a little bit. I guess I use our colleague JD Young,
our good friend
and colleague. JD had a podcast on the Locked On Sharks podcast this week. A really interesting podcast on Thursday about this whole Barracuda culture. And a couple of things he noted that weren't, directly related to the Martin Kaut interview, but other stuff that he had heard or had seen before. And again, awesome work, JD. That was a really good podcast to listen to. So some things that he mentioned. He said that they didn't provide meals for the guys until March. And then, do you think that, like, if that's the case, is it good for these players to be grabbing like In-N-Out and Chipotle every game or before every game rather than getting like team design meals?
Yeah. Just to quote JD, just so we don't.
Sure.
So the exact quote is: "If you're a young player on your way to the rink, grab yourself at the drive-through. Isn't developing players teaching them to take care of their body?"
Which is a very good quote. And then if you're still providing breakfast and they're still going out, at least you're still providing them with an option, was something that he also mentioned. And then finally, he mentioned that players' wives and their girlfriends, the WAGs, didn't have their own like way to watch the game. They didn't have a private box.
They had a way to watch the game, but it just was
not a box, basically.
Right.
So I guess was there any digging that you could do on those fronts?
Yeah. So first, I want to mention about the meals thing, because that did catch my attention. As what's the AHL norm with that? Have the Barracuda been doing something wrong? As far as I understand, there's I think what JD was told, as far as I understand, there's nothing inaccurate about what he said. Not that I've heard so far. But I will say, though, that first that in my observation, the Barracuda have always provided players with post-game meals. I don't know, because I've seen it, after a game in the hallways of the locker room. Nothing tremendous, looked like some pizza, maybe some salad, but still, food, sustenance, energy, right? Whatever, right? And I didn't know before this, about sort of the situation during practice, morning skates, if there was any breakfast or anything provided, or pregame. And so I checked around with a few people, and AHL executives, I'll say here, so people who know about this kind of stuff, and also people that have long AHL playing experience, and so they've kind of seen the different kind of ways that teams treat players, right? And I was told that just in general that players, providing all meals to players, at least at the AHL level, is a new thing, relatively new thing. I'm not saying that no one is doing it, but not every team is doing it. This is a contrast to, I did a great interview with Marcus Nudavara recently, just on San Jose Hockey Now. And I don't want to get into all of it because we're talking about something else. But one thing that Marcus mentioned is when he was rehabilitating with the Sharks, that he loved the breakfast. And he loved it's a buffet, so many choices, et cetera, right? And he genuinely felt spoiled and he loved it. Now, that is Marcus Nudavara on the Sharks. And I think that is about the AHL norm. The AHL, that wouldn't be that's not the norm. And the same goes for players, wives and girlfriends having a private box. Also, not necessarily the norm at the AHL level. And Yeah, actually, one source said that this is the exact quote: "Food isn't required at all. Providing food is a new thing." And having a private section for the family isn't necessarily a thing either. And so it's not to say that they shouldn't be things. And so if you're talking about, making the Barracuda not cutting edge isn't the right word, but like
New
a
age, maybe.
head of the class
Yeah.
organization in the AHL, then that might be something that you consider, that you provide all meals, and that there's plenty of space at Tech CU. JD said that in his podcast, and I
Mhm.
agree. And we've all seen it. There's plenty of space in both the boxes and regular seats, and so yeah,
Sure.
you can have a box for them. I don't think there's I don't. I
And
mean, it's not my money, but
yeah, and
but
there is,
yeah,
there is advantages of, the San Jose having their AHL team in the same area as their NHL team, but that's not also the norm by far in the NHL.
sure.
Most AHL teams are completely dislocated from their
Hmm.
NHL, actual squads, and a lot of them aren't owned by the same group either. So
Hmm.
AHL teams are owned by different management groups than their NHL teams. They just happen to corroborate together. So
Right.
it's not like everything is a one size fits all. Every single AHL team is getting 3-course meals every day. It would be something that we would, I think, obviously players probably want, but it's
Sure.
not something that is, the norm, like you said.
Right, right, right. So yeah, so and I would say that like that can be improved, I guess. Yeah, for
Sure.
sure. But I don't know if it is rises to the level of of this like big awful problem that speaks to the Barracuda organization, just being a total mess or anything like that.
Yeah. And, obviously, like there's going to be post-year interviews that are going to happen throughout the organization. Or they might have already happened. These could be things that are being brought up or might
Yeah,
be
yeah.
brought up.
The interviews have
Yeah.
happened, exit interviews. Yeah.
Yeah, and this Martin Kaut interview might honestly be like a time when they review things. Maybe, maybe not, but it's something that I wouldn't say that because it didn't happen. A, that it's a problem, and B, that it won't be fixed if it didn't happen. So a few more things. So you were mentioning something, we were talking earlier, something random that you were hearing about this whole the Barracuda.
This is more funny to me, but yeah, a couple people did mention me in the course of my research that Joe Will, the GM of the Barracuda, isn't great about returning phone calls. So
Hasn't called you back yet, Shay?
not me, but yeah, but so I found that kind of amusing.
Hmm. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to dig on that. Maybe leave more voicemails. Maybe we'll get some.
Maybe his voicemail box is full. That's the worst, right? When
That's
you
what
call
it is.
somebody and their
Yeah,
voicemail box is full.
that's what it is. And I think we've talked a lot about this, and first and foremost, want to mention it again. The Sharks have denied the claim that Martin Kaut made about fighting,
Hmm.
which specifically is the most
Egregious.
egregious, or the hot button issue that might get raised from that interview. So I want to
Hmm.
make that up front, that they denied it. He said it happened. We might not know ever whether or not it was true, or
I'm gonna keep working on it, guys.
Shang's going to keep working on it. But the final summary is there is some interesting things to think about with the Barracuda. That maybe there is something about the younger players only playing for themselves, but maybe that's not out of the norm in general for 21-year-olds to try and
But
make the
can be
NHL.
better.
But it could get improved. And there's definitely a discipline problem with just the amount of bad penalties and selfish plays that they take, especially late in games. That's pretty common, or pretty apparent throughout the year for sure. And then regarding the food situation and the just catering more to the players on the Barracuda, that it's not the norm either, but maybe it's something that could be improved overall.
Yep, and I eat plenty around the Tech CU and SAP Center before the game, so I have recommendations. So if they want the some good food
Sure.
coming in.
Or again, you could recommend catering for them, for the Barracuda staff. Maybe we can find a way to get this to be fixed. We will update you as we know it. Is there anything else that you wanted to summarize about the whole situation, Shane?
Well, I think in general, I did want to say that I'm not the definitive source of all this. I'm trying, and like I said, spoken with many leak sources. Some more inside, some more outside, and this is what I've gotten so far. And so I'm gonna keep working on it. But right now, just again at the moment, from everything I've gathered, I would say that the Barracuda are not considered the top of the class AHL organization, even though that new arena is pretty sweet, right?
Mm.
But if the Barracuda had a comment box, like outside the locker room or outside of the
Sure.
office or wherever you might have a comment box, right? That it might be stuffed with a lot of comments and a good amount of complaints. Yeah, so I recognize that. But besides the Kaut accusation about being asked to fight in every single game, which again, the Sharks have categorically and completely denied, I haven't heard of anything specific telling me that it's a problem organization. It's an organization that players don't want to go to, that agents don't want their players to play at, and things like that. Individual players could have problems. They could be unhappy with this or that coaching staff treatment, treatment of the players, treatment of their family, right? And that could be individual to the player, but not so great that there is this, big red alert when a Barracuda call you and see if you want to sign with them. And we can see that with the guys that they've signed, pretty good AHL players in Carpenter, Saparin, and Todd.
Sure.
Indeed, I think the Barracuda, from what we gather, they can lead the way more in terms of being a, top of the class organization instead of sort of trending or following with the rest of the AHL. But at the moment, the big question for me once again is Kaut's fighting accusations. But besides that, the Barracuda are just another another AHL organization. Can be better, can be worse. And so anyway, will we hear more stuff beyond Kaut? We'll see. Maybe there will be more, and maybe this last hour, I'm gonna look really stupid in the end. But once again, though, yeah, I'll just repeat it again. From everything that I've gathered, everything that I've been digging at, talking with many people, and I'm still gonna work on it. But right now, my view of the Barracuda is that they're just another AHL organization.
Yeah. And I think it's not the prettiest bow that we can put on this present for today. It might just be a mediocre bow.
Yeah, no better, no worse.
Exactly. We're trying to find the actual truth here regarding what the Barracuda are as an organization. I think and this is a pretty good segment or segue to our upcoming interview with Anthony Duclair, is that in hockey, there's, for the past 4 or 5 years, there's been kind of a change in hockey culture, right? There's been lots of accusations of, misconduct, sexual assault, racism, all sorts of things in hockey that are real and serious, that I think, when people start to hear these kinds of accusations happening for their favorite organization, obviously they're going to listen, because this are the things that are being brought up in hockey, and it's something that we can't ignore. But it's a good thing that we continue to dig to try and find the right information to get to fans. So in our interview with Anthony Duclair, which we're going to get to in a minute, he mentions a lot of the things that he had to deal with as a child to keep playing the game of hockey, the game that he loves, dealing with racism even as a young child. So I think just something to keep in mind as we get into that interview is that, hockey is the game that we all love, but it can be problematic and something that we have to take head on as we move forward. Basically.
Yeah, we had to keep investigating and digging when people aren't talking as much. Or in Anthony's case here, he was very open and candid, and it's a great interview.
Yeah. So enjoy, guys. And it's been a little bit of a heavier week this week. And again, like I'll say every single week, next week, we're going to have, Erik Karlsson trade news. It's going to be a news.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. One day we'll talk about it.
2 hours breaking down the entirety of the trade from like the first round pick to the AHL, guy that we got, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the year is 2033. Erik Karlsson is still on the Sharks cap.
Exactly.
Still a retainment slot.
Yeah, it's still $5.75 million against the cap. Anyways. All right, guys, have a good week. We'll see you next week. Hope you enjoyed the interview. And now we welcome Anthony Duclair to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. Anthony is one of the newest members of the Sharks. He was acquired in a trade for Steven Lawrence earlier this July from the Florida Panthers. He has played a total of 9 seasons in the NHL with 6 different teams after being drafted in 2013 by the New York Rangers. In the 2021-2022 season, he set career highs in goals, assists, and points with the Panthers with 31 goals and 58 points. He was an integral part of Florida's Stanley Cup final run, scoring 11 points in 20 games this past playoff. Everybody welcome Anthony Duclair.
Thanks for having me.
Anthony, I wanted to start off first with your involvement with the Black Ice hockey documentary. Black Ice is produced by LeBron James and Drake, among others, and stars PK Subban, Wayne Simmons, Sarah Nurse, yourself, and many others. And it's out now exclusively at AMC theaters in the U.S. And I watched it on Monday, and I've got to say there's some harrowing stuff in there about the racism that you and your peers have faced, even when you were little kids. But Black Ice is also a story of, one of the great underappreciated innovators in the sport of hockey, the Colored Hockey League, which predates it's from the 1900s. And so let's start there, Anthony. One of the coolest things about the documentary about Black Ice is hearing about the Colored Hockey League and its innovations like the slap shots. I'm just wondering, was this documentary the first time that you heard of the CHL?
No, it wasn't the first time. Actually, my dad, when I was growing up, actually got me the book and maybe read it. So I knew all about it, not to the extent of the documentary, obviously. When I first saw the documentary is where I saw some, new revelations and stuff like that. But at the same time, I knew about it. I knew how, they were out there in the East Coast in Canada, playing the game that they love. And then, their league got shut down and then the NHL came by. But I knew all about it growing up. But, seeing that documentary obviously opened my eyes, and hopefully, a lot of people can go ahead and watch that too, and hopefully they can, learn a little bit of history about the Colored Hockey League and how it was founded before the NHL.
Yeah, that's like some cool Canadian hockey knowledge that I didn't know, being here in the U.S. And so I'm glad that the documentary brought it to light. I also wanted to ask you, in the documentary, you told a really gut-wrenching story about your first encounter with racism in hockey. About when you were 9 or 10 at a youth hockey tournament, having racist gestures and taunts directed at you by parents. And want to ask you, how often did you have to deal with that throughout your youth career?
Yeah, pretty often. It happened a couple times, to be honest. And all when I was younger, growing up, and it's tough, when you're the only black kid on your team, the only black kid, on both teams playing. I could only imagine how hard it was on my parents as well for them when they were growing up. I'm sure it was even worse. And it made me stronger. I think it made me mature, at a very young age. And I had to understand, what it is to be, a black person in this world early on in my life. And, just sharing those experiences sometimes, with my parents, and just having those difficult conversations, because, it's not easy, growing up, and sometimes you just feel alone. You feel like nobody can understand you, and especially in the locker room where nobody really looks like you. So for myself, it was tough at times, but at the same time, I love the game so much that I didn't want anyone to tell me what I can't do, and I didn't want anyone to put me down to a point where I was going to quit the sport. So I've thought about it, obviously growing up, but it wasn't something that I was going to go through with. And my passion was to make my goal was to make the NHL, and I just stuck with that throughout my whole childhood.
It's it's even sad to even have to talk about. Like, was there ever a point a breaking point for you that you thought that maybe this sport isn't for me?
I like I said, I have those conversations with myself, but I just love the sport so much that I didn't want to get there. To be
That's
honest,
good.
growing up, when I fell in love with hockey, I would say around 4 or 5 years old, I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. Growing up, Montreal Canadiens fan, watching the Canadiens play, and I just knew that's just my only goal in mind is to make it there someday. And there were times, difficult times where it might not seem too bright, but at the same time, I just stuck with it, and I knew that there's going to be a path for me somehow.
And one thing that you just mentioned this, one thing that shines through in this documentary is that you and so many of your peers, you guys persevered through all this hate because of, maybe just simply because of your love of the game. And, what else gets you through the trials and tribulations that you faced here? Who do you credit for overcoming, kind of all the people that may not want you here? And you mentioned your parents.
Yeah, I mean, family and close friends obviously are probably the main people that got me through those tough times. I credit them, even to this day. So, I'm very lucky to, be part of, a family where they raised myself and my brother and my little two sisters the right way, and to treat others with respect and love, and just give back whenever you can, and just treat people how you want to be treated is obviously the main line we've heard, growing up. And it doesn't matter, what's happened to you or whatnot. You still, got to show that sense of respect. And as I grew older, obviously people started to mature and stuff, and started to hear less and less, and came to a point where I didn't have to worry about that anymore. But for me now in this position I am today, I'm still hearing those stories from kids that are playing hockey. So I'm obviously doing my best to reach out to those kids, and reach out to the communities, and just explain my story, explain my experiences.
And in general, was that the message from your parents that, treat others like you want to be treated, and you sort of have to turn the other cheek, kind of what people are saying to you?
Yeah, I mean, put your head down and work harder. I feel like, just as a race, as Black people, we just have to work harder to get what we want. And that's just the mentality my dad ingrained in me at a young age. And he's always preached to work harder, to do extra. And I think that's the big reason why I made it to the NHL, is just because of the extra ice times. I've done the extra workouts that my teammates on the teams, my local teams, wouldn't be doing, behind the scenes. And just all those extra ice times, extra workouts, obviously added up. And I saw my progression at an early age, come to fruition. And like I said, just having that success early on, when you're a pretty good player, and you're getting scouted to play on big teams, and you don't want to anything to ruin that. And when those difficult times happen, I just kept a straight arrow, and kept believing in my goal.
And you talked about working with younger players. Through your Duclair Foundation, you've held camps this summer for youth players of all backgrounds in Florida and Montreal. And so, anyway, for the players of color in your camp, do you talk to them about sort of the hate that you faced, and how has that helped them with the hate that they faced, they will face in the coming years, or have faced already?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty cool experience to help these camps. One in Florida, one in Montreal, my hometown. It was a project that I've always wanted to do since I stepped in the league. I knew that was just something I wanted to do, and I didn't know when it was going to happen, but I just gotta let time decide that. And I think this year was actually a perfect timing to get that going. And both camps, I've had kids come up to me, personally, and ask them, what did you do? What happened when you faced those challenges? Because they face those those taunts, those racist acts, and these are kids that are 8, 9, 10 years old. So it's not really surprising to me anymore. I've kind of heard it all. I've seen it all, to be honest. And for me, when I'm hearing this, from these 9, 10-year-old kids, my heart, goes out to them, and I just want to do everything possible to, make them feel welcome, make them feel, confident in what they're doing. And I held, in both camps, like a full, camp meeting where I would sit the kids down and explain my story, explain my experiences, and answer all the questions that they may have, and just having some tough conversations with with kids. It's not something that everyone wants to talk about, but I think it's necessary, especially in this sport. And if we want to see the sport grow and want to see the sport evolve, like I think we can see, like like other leagues, like the NBA, the NFL. I don't think there's any reason why the NHL can get to that level. And I think we need more diversity, and I'm just trying to do my part to help the younger generation be confident in their shoes.
Well, like you said, Anthony, it's a tough conversation, but it's an important one. So I thank you for talking about it. Everybody, go see Black Ice. It's in only at AMC theaters right now.
Awesome.
Anthony, let's move on a little bit to the Sharks, if that's all right. In your introductory press conference, you talked a lot about Joe Thornton, talking with him about San Jose. And you played with Joe in Florida in 2021 and 2022. Do you have a favorite Joe Thornton story? or one you can share with us, I guess.
Where do I even start with this guy? No, I mean, we all know Joe. He's such a happy, fun-loving, guy. He's just so full of energy every single day. Even at his age, I'm pretty sure he was 41, 42 at the time when he was playing with us. But I think it was just constant, everyday laughs. That's what I remember from Joe. He comes to the rink and he's the loudest guy in the room, and he's just so fun, and gets all the boys going. It doesn't matter what happened the night before or that day. He's making everybody smile, and I was actually such an honor to play with him. Even just for that 1 year. We stayed in contact even through this season. He would call the boys on FaceTime. He loves his FaceTime calls, so he would call the boys all the time during the year just to catch up. And that's just the type of guy he is. He's just so much respect for him, obviously, and what he's done in his career. But just off the ice, he just follows it up with his attitude and his camaraderie amongst teammates.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he was still calling you guys during the season. His ex, Panthers teammates. He must have been really proud of you guys throughout your cup run.
Yeah, no, he was great. He was pulling for us. He was telling us since the beginning. So he said, he had lots of fun playing with us, and he's he definitely helped us, get through that run, and obviously appreciate his friendship for sure.
What are they kind of like group calls? Because I'm kind of imagining Jumbo calling you after practice, and it's you and Matt Tkachuk and I don't know, Alexander, and there's Jumbo on another line. I don't know.
Yeah, like he would, FaceTime me, and if I'm near the boys or on the bus or whatever, I'll just
awesome.
Hold up the phone in front of the boys, and he would just scream out, "Hey, what's up, fellas?" And just have a laugh. He's such an enjoyable guy to be around.
Yeah. We hear he's still a workout machine. So do you think there's a chance that he's going to center you next season on the show?
I would absolutely love that.
I'm going to put it down
to play another season with Jumbo. That would be awesome.
And you're also coming to San Jose with Givani Smith. What can you tell us about Givani on the ice and in the room?
Yeah, he's a really great guy. I got obviously I've played against him a couple years, but that was the first time I actually got to meet him last year and as a teammate. He's a big body. He likes to get on the forecheck. He's actually got some speed and some sneaky skill. So look for him to be a threat. On the hard on the forecheck, and he's a big body in that front. So he can definitely finish around the net, tip some pucks, and I'm looking forward for him to, really step up and do his own. And this is a big year for him in where he is in his career. So I'm excited to play alongside him again and, help him in any way I can.
Awesome. And have you talked yet with David Quinn about what he has planned for you this season, or just some of the Sharks' plans this season?
We had one conversation with both, Mike and David right where I got traded. And it was just about welcoming me to the team and stuff like that. And I just let him know that, wherever he has me, in the lineup or whoever he has me playing with, I'm just excited to be there. And I'm looking forward to, coming down there in training camp, working hard and doing everything I can to, win some games. So for me, it's business as usual, to be honest. We haven't gone into too much detail in my role and stuff, but I'm just looking forward to having a big season. I think I told him my goal this year is to play 82 games. I've yet to do that in my career yet, so especially after missing so much time last year, it's a big summer this year for me to get healthy and get in the best shape I can to help produce.
I would guess that the one message that they had for you is score.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Well, Anthony, I want to thank you so much for your time here. Just had actually just a couple more for you.
Yeah.
One a little more serious, and one hopefully a little more fun. You are part of the Hockey Diversity Alliance. You do a lot of great work with them. But I do have to ask you about a recent Twitter spat between founding member Evander Kane and the HGA. And essentially, for those of you listening that aren't aware, Evander wrote on Twitter that he's leaving the HGA because HGA members, and I quote, are being led and influenced by members with individual agendas. And the HGA countered on Twitter that Evander hasn't really been part of the HGA for 2 years and said, and I quote, he needed to do more work before rejoining, and that Evander's accusations of individual agendas are, and I quote, unfounded. And so just asking you, what can you say about Evander's claim that the HGA is perhaps veering from what he thinks the sort of the vision of what the organization should be?
Yeah, pretty shocking. To be honest, I stand by our statement. Last 2 years, we Evander hasn't been part of the Hockey Diversity Alliance. He was removed, after his claims of bankruptcy, came to light, and sponsorships and partners that worked with the HGA agreed that it was better that he leaves, as soon as the news broke out. So pretty shocking to hear that from him. For us, we're trying to do our best to grow the game, and there's no personal agenda to it. That's just what we're trying to do, and we've done exactly that since forming the alliance 3 years ago. And Akeem Aliu has done an unbelievable job, since then to take over the reins, and he's done, built some incredible programs in the area of Toronto, and just helping kids, helping families, get access to hockey equipment and get access to practice times on the ice and even off the ice with ball hockey. So we're doing incredible work. We're only starting, especially, you've seen a couple of HDA members on the film Black Ice, and we're going to keep building, keep trying to grow the game, and keep doing some solid work. So anything apart from that is going to be shocking to me, shocking to us, and we know that it's not going to be easy. There's some people that might have different views and stuff like that, but for us, we're looking at the big picture, and that's to grow the game, and we're going to continue to do that.
And anything exciting on tap for HGA this coming year?
Lots of secrets, so we'll have to show you when it gets done. But
Okay.
between the HTA, between my foundation, lots of exciting news to come ahead for sure.
And so Sheng got to ask the hard question. I'm going to ask the fun question then. So you're a man of fashion and style, Anthony. I have to ask you this weekend: are you seeing Barbie or Oppenheimer, or are you seeing both of them?
I would love to see Oppenheimer. I have no plans on seeing Barbie.
I'm surprised. I thought you might say Barbie. So
I have no plans right now. But, I never say never, but I got no plans right now. But I'm actually really excited to see that Oppenheimer. I'm not sure when I'll be able to see it, but it seems like a great movie, and he's one of my favorite actors. I loved him from the TV series. Peaky Blinders. Yeah, it's one of my favorite TV shows of all time. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Well, I got to say, Anthony, I think Keegan would agree. You look great in pink. So
just teal for me.
Just teal. All right. Thank you so much, Anthony, for joining us and for
thank you, Anthony.
humoring us on our questions.
Yeah, thank you guys. Looking forward to meeting you at camp.
Yep. Take it easy, man.
Awesome. Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.